Hello and welcome to Gravitas Wins Conversations. I feel incredibly lucky to have Tanmay for today's conversation. He has been a pioneer in sketchnoting and has become a solopreneur to play in the creator economy. We are going to explore creator economy and how one can play in it. Hope you will enjoy this conversation. Hi, Tanmay. Welcome to the conversation.
Hey, Joseph, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm delighted to be meeting you again through this platform and thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So let's start with how you started with sketchnoting. And especially, I want to know how you created a niche for yourself in that sketchnoting.
Sure. So, I think the story goes like this that I was a new manager in year 2006. I was always fascinated by the process of writing. So I started documenting my lessons as a new people manager in 2006 and I started writing a blog. This blog was named Q Aspire because I was in quality domain back then. I think I still am in the quality domain today. So there was a fervent aspiration to deliver quality, and that's how the blog came into being. I thought I was writing for myself, but very soon I realized that I was writing for others. So my writing was a service to others. There were people reading my blog, people commenting on it from across the globe. And so I started seeing my writing as a service. And if I'm offering my writing or my ideas as a service to others, then the challenge is how do I make it better? So in year 2009, I wrote my first book, which was called Quality Tweet. And this book was a collection of 140 chapters, every chapter being one tweet, about 140 characters, and 140 such chapters divided in sections like people, process, and leadership. And the book went the book was the first one of the first tweet books in the world, and it made a very good impact on people who read it, people who used it in their meetings and stuff like that. Ever since then I have been on the lookout for ways to express myself more clearly, and that's what brought me to 100-word posts. I wrote 3 books after that, um, until I stumbled upon sketchnotes in year 2015. Now, I started this journey as a new manager in 2014. I started leading, one of the larger organizations, about 700 people organization, as as the head of country operations. I was the country managing director, and it gave me a lot of playground to test my theories, to build a strong,
Mhm.
formidable culture. And so, when my experience started to grow, my need to put that out in a form and function that talks to people, that's brain friendly. And by that time I think information also started exploding. And so I stumbled upon sketchnotes thanks to one of my friends. His name is Abhijit Bhaduri. And I stumbled upon his sketchnotes, and then I got started with that journey. And the thing with me is that if I start something, I try to keep at it for a long time. So I started a blog in 2006, and since 2006, uh, almost 14, 16 years now that I've been blogging. Every single month I've written something or the other. So there's not a single
Mhm.
month or week where I would have not written something. So if I start something, I'm very consistent at doing it. I think that's my strength. Same applies to sketchnotes
Mhm.
as well. But I started doing sketchnote in 2015, and by then I had a significant audience on my blog as well, because I'd written books, because I was part of Twitter communities and stuff like that back in 2015. So I had an early moving advantage in the world of blogging. And that's how sketchnotes started to happen. Then I started sharing my rough scribbles out there. People started liking it, so I started upping my game by having better pen, better paper. Eventually in 2018 I invested in an iPad, Apple Pencil, and started drawing it digitally, and have never looked back uh, since then. After I started this journey, I also got opportunity to work with some of the best-selling authors across the globe, helping them illustrate their ideas, as ideas that were printed in their book in form of sketch notes. So it's been an incredible journey. I've worked with global organizations, exceptional thought leaders uh, who I really respect and admire. So it's been a wonderful journey so far, I must say. And I think if I were to talk about how do I create a niche, I think that's a topic that deserves a different or sort of a separate answer to it, right? Now, this was my
Yeah.
journey, but I believe that innovation happens at the intersections of two disciplines. Now, I could be
Mm.
a great leader, but if I don't know how to express myself out there, or if I'm not comfortable with social media and using it for disseminating my knowledge, it might not work, right? So I think that the two things that I bring together is my 23 years of corporate leadership experience combined with the visual thinking experience. And when I combine those two things, a purpose starts to come out. My purpose since I've
Mm.
been a business leader has been to enable better leaders and better leadership within the organizations. What has happened is that sketchnote is not a skill in itself, it is a tool for me.
Mm.
And when the tool is used in a context that has a purpose, niche starts to happen. So my
Mm.
advice to people who are aspiring creators, people might be good at public speaking, people who are good at illustrating, people who are good at YouTube videos, podcast, etc. My only submission to them is that do not look at what you're doing as an absolute, but look at it as a component of a larger system. Look for intersections between two things. That's where differentiation will happen. Intersections are less crowded than absolute areas. And I think use your art as a tool to make a difference. Influence, building a niche, having a lot of followers, having a lot of likes, all of that will evolve as a byproduct of the journey. Um,
Mm.
I've lived in Chandigarh for 7 years. And if you enter
Yeah.
the rock garden, the famous rock garden, there is a large stone structure there on which it's written, the journey is the reward. And i and
Mm.
that's been my mantra for last 10 years, that I don't think about how many followers I have. I don't look at my website statistics, I don't look at my Twitter follower counts that often. What I do is I just keep doing what helps others, I keep doing what adds value into this world, and doing it in a way that's unique to myself, that's a unique expression of who I am, whether it's my handwriting, the way I draw, the way I speak, the way I write. It's all unique to me. Now if I package all my uniqueness into my work and apply it in a context and purpose, then niche starts to happen. It's not a goal that I want to create a niche for myself. My goal is to make a difference. Niche happens as a byproduct.
How do you ensure that what you're putting it out is creating value? And also, how do you kind of go deeper and say these are the things that are going to create value? How do
Absolutely.
you find
Yeah,
that?
so let me take this example of sketch notes. Okay. Now,
Okay.
I started creating sketch notes, and as I said, by then I already had an audience. So, first thing first, I believe that creators have to be on their own platform. They have to own their data, they have
Mm.
to own their content. That is absolute must, right? Having your own audience is the most powerful thing in a connected world. Otherwise, you can still have
Mm.
an audience, but it will come to you through platforms. Platforms are driven by algorithms and so on and so forth, right? So it starts with building, having your own audience. Number one. Number two, I think is that as a creator, as a sketchnote creator, right? I try to look for how does this align to my purpose, and then I iterate, right? So every single drip of sketchnote that I share out there in the world may not be great, okay, but
Okay.
once I get a feedback that okay, this is a sketch note that helped, I will say how can I make it better, and then the next sketch note will be even
Mm.
better, and the next sketch note will be even better, and so on. So just to give an example, that I wrote a sketch note on how to simplify work, but there was so much of
Okay.
content in it that sketch note on simplifying the work was complex. so
Okay.
so somebody told me, so a lot of people praised it, it was viral, it was shared. However, a couple of people told me that this sketch note on simplifying work is itself a very complex, right? Now that told me that every time I create a sketch note, my challenge number one, that feedback that I got is that it's useful but it's too complex. Now how do I make it useful
Mm.
and simple, right? How do I add more colors to it? How do I make it more brain friendly? How do I only extract the most essential parts of the idea, right? Because I look at my
Mm.
work as a service to idea. You will, as
Mm.
a customer, if you come back to me and say, I want to create a sketch note, I'll say, okay, it's not about me and you, it's about the idea. And two of us are in the service of the idea. My work, my sketch notes, my visual articulation visual synthesis, visual co-creation is all in the service of the idea. Because at the end of the day, I want to make ideas go far and wide. My sketch notes are simply a tool to do it. If my ideas spread far and wide, I will basically have better leadership. And that's why I think it's important to connect your art with a context. My context is organizational and business leadership. How can we how can we
Mm.
make better leaders? How can we cultivate better leadership within the organization? And if that's my purpose, my sketch notes are a tool. And when you start sharing it out to the world, people who are sharing the same context and the same problem statement with you would walk up to you and say, hey, this is fantastic, this is great. And that feedback sort of fuels the pursuit, it fuels the journey. And that's how the journey goes forward. It defines what next step will you take. Because as it is, I don't look at the whole journey and uh, create a 3 year or a 5 year plan. What I do is I'll say, what do I do today? And then based on the feedback, what do I do tomorrow, in next month, next 6 months, right? So it's a very iterative sort of process. But feedback, having your own audience, marrying your art with the purpose, and you really using it to solve important problems is important. Leadership is one problem that we have in organizations, but the other problem we have is that people are bogged down in information. There are social media
Mhm.
platforms,
Mm.
there are books, everything is craving for your attention. You're scrolling all the time. How do you make sure that you create something that people sit back and take a notice, that they consume and it helps them, right? So Sketchnote solves
Mm.
that problem. The subject of my Sketchnote solves an organizational problem. So if you look at it, right, it's a part of solution statement. It's not about how great I am. It's not about how wonderful my drawing or handwriting is. It is about the idea, servicing the idea in a way that it reaches far and wide, which in turn leads to behavioral change, which in turn leads to better leadership, better organizations. And I think that makes the whole difference. So you can see the chain that it's not about art or it's about ideas, and it's about serving the ideas well so that they go far and wide.
Wonderful, Tanmay. We can go into multiple directions from whatever that you have
Yeah.
said, but I want to switch gears and talk about you recently became a solopreneur after a very long stint, as you said, in corporate sector. So, how did you take that decision, and how has been your journey so far as a solopreneur?
So I think just with everything else in my own career, which was mostly unplanned, but led to the right places. Um, the COVID actually accelerated the great awakening, so to say. After being a corporate leader for
Hmm.
23 years, COVID really allowed me to sit back and reassess my priorities and thinking about what could I do, what are my strengths, and wanting to live a life that is inside out and not outside in. Right? We are mostly driven by external
Hmm.
demands and external KPIs and whatnot. I thought now is the time after 23 years that I could step back and live an inside out life. What that means is that I've already been successful in a corporate career. Now, how do I become more significant in what I do? So, that
Mm.
journey was from success to significance, and from outside into inside out. And I think I already had the tools. I had this rich experience. I've been doing leadership trainings, workshops, coaching, executive coaching, performance consulting, etc., for almost last 10 years. On and
Hmm.
off. So I had that platform. I had visual notes. I have been visually facilitating teams. I have led a large organization and stuff like that. So all that experience combined, I thought that this might be a formidable offering where I could maximize my impact to more than one organizations. And that was simply the idea that how do I maximize myself out so that more than one organizations can benefit from what I do. And that pursuit led to companies like Microsoft, very large organizations like Microsoft in US and several other global customers coming up, walking up to me saying, hey, we want you to help us with this. We want you to help us with that. And the nature of work I do today is very diverse, from working with authors to illustrate their ideas to working with company directors to coach them, working with organizations as non-executive board members. So there are a lot of different things that I do today. It's creatively far more satisfying. The impact it makes
Mm.
is visible, and it's been a wonderful journey so far. Yeah,
uh, of course, like Naman, good luck with whatever that you are going to do. And as you rightly said, you really don't know what is going to come in. So
absolutely.
you iterate over it. So I only wish that you do more of that. Tanmay, when somebody is looking at, okay, now I want to play in the creator
Mhm.
economy, I want to be a solopreneur using my whatever talent that I have. What are the first steps that they have to take, especially what kind of mindset that they should develop
Mhm.
in pursuing that particular goal?
I think the first thing, if you connect the dots from my journey, it is what I have learned is that
Yeah.
if you want to be an independent creator who wants to add value, and assuming that you're starting with purpose, I think the first thing we need is the mindset of generosity, because we
Mm,
have been trained to keep knowledge to ourselves, not collaborate, really compete with people who are doing similar kinds of work and stuff like that. And the mindset of generosity, the mindset of abundance says that there is enough for everybody and we should just focus on what we are doing and try to do it best. And what that means is working out loud, putting your process out there, putting your lessons out there. I think that's very important. The second part is about building audience. Now, building audience is not easy. It took me like 15 years to build a follower on my blog, a subscriber list that is decent. It took me 15 years, 16 years to have, let's say, tens of thousands of views coming onto my website and so on, right? So I think what has underpinned the whole journey is generosity, and what I call three C's of leading and learning on social media, which is creating, curating, and contributing. Now, what I mean by
mm,
that is that we have unique ideas, unique experiences. We should be able to create new stuff and put it out in the world. That's step number one. Step number two is we need to curate, which means that like minded people are sharing a lot of their lessons and learning as well. How do we put all of that into a frame that people can relate with? That's curation. And
mm,
then the third is
mm,
contribution, which means that if Joseph has a great idea and if Tanmay has an idea that adds to Joseph's idea, then I should be able to comment on it. I should take that idea further, maybe write a complimentary blog post, stuff like that. And generally build relationships, because thriving
mm,
on social media is not about media, to be honest. It is about being social.
mm,
It is about being
mm,
social, which means the way we are talking today, this is a social act. This is a conversation that's enriching both of us at the same time. And probably the listeners who will listen to this podcast, right? And so we have to focus on being social without focusing too much on media. The problem today is that creators get hung up with what platform should I use? What tools do I use? How do I set up my automated workflow and stuff like that? Those are problems that you can easily tackle later on. The first problem is how do I build my own content on my own platform so that I'm not dependent on the algorithms, such that I'm able to serve my audience. I think that is at
mm,
the heart of it, right? Finding your niche and finding your intersection where you want to play. The second is consistency, because a lot of people I've seen is that they start you know putting things on Instagram. The moment there are a few weeks when likes go down, right, they will switch to Twitter, they will go on to blogging, then leave it and then go on to something. So they're always looking for the next shiny object. My
mm,
submission is that once you own your own platform, which is in my case my website or my blog, I think we need to be consistent. Keep at it for a
mm,
long time without getting bogged down. As I said, not
mm,
look at the journey and outcomes, but look at the steps. That's where it helps. Because today I'm not worried about what should I write on Medium or should I write on Get Review or whatever, right? Newsletters and stuff. I write on my blog. My blog has RSS subscribers. People will get it. It's a form of newsletter in itself. I don't need to use
mm,
any other service for newsletter. My blog itself is a newsletter if I use it, sort of that way. Yeah, and I think in terms of creating, I think one of the best advices that I ever heard on this, on creating a consistent flow, is from Austin Kleon. He says that
mhm,
create stock, right? Create a flow of work, right? Write every day on your blog, tweet every day. Once in a while, take a stock of all of that, compile it into some form that's a usable
mm,
form, and convert it into a stock material. So right, so go with the flow, do things every day. Once in a while, pick what's useful from that, create a stock, and maybe offer it to your subscribers, share it online, maybe sell it, whatever. But we have to constantly get in touch with ideas. We have to constantly iterate over what works, and then sort of do that. So I think if I were to summarize, it's mindset of generosity, creating, curating, and contributing, being consistent and showing up regularly, with a mindset of generosity, with a mindset of building relationship with people, is very important. The last thing I think is important from a mindset perspective is lifelong learning, which means to say that how does this help others? Constantly asking that question every step of the way. How does this help others? What problem does this really solve? How can I do it? How can I
Mm.
make it better? And what change will this bring about? If I'm able to constantly question, like this is my 3 question checklist for every creation that I put out.
Okay.
And if a creation does not meet any of these requirements, so let's say it falls out of place, then I will probably create it but not share it. It will be for my consumption, not for
Ah.
the world's consumption. So I think that's the
Mm.
mindset that creators need to have, and focus on the long game, because there are no shortcuts in life. And creator economy in itself is so crowded these days. And I was reading a statistic which says that, of so many people who are in creator economy, only about 10% earn a really decent living. I think less than 10% earn a really decent living. Rest of them
Mm.
are still struggling.
Mm.
They're part-time creators, full-time, they're employees in some companies and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that chaos that's out there, right? The way to stand out of that
Yeah.
chaos is to focus on the long game, and differentiate yourself that way.
Lovely, Tanmay. Another question that I have is, in the spectrum of artist to an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
how do you handle that? The conflict that comes in between that being an artist and an
So,
entrepreneur. How do you
so
handle
you're
it?
putting your finger on a painful nerve, I must say, because it's never been easy for me. And I think, as a solopreneur, you get to sort of create. You have to create. You have to do the normal business stuff. You have to send proposals. You raise invoices. You talk to customers, understand their specs and stuff like that. It's a lot of work, right? And a single creator, I mean, a solopreneur is just very limited in that sense. So it has not been easy, but I think I've, over a period of last 1.5 years that I've been into business, I've learned how to deal with it. So what I do is that on my calendar I have blocked my time for delivering services. So one of the things I do is I work with global organizations and authors and deliver services to them, whether it is training, teaching, coaching, visualization, graphic recording, visual facilitation, whatever that service or offering is. It needs to be on my calendar, right? And
Mm.
so that's one thing, that time blocking his so part of my day is blocked for creative, delivering creative services. I also build products. I also build information products and stuff like that. So part of my week is devoted to creating, products and stuff like that. Luckily, I don't have any sales effort, because all
Mm.
the sales happens in a pull mode, right? People walk up to me, then we talk, and then something starts to happen. I also put out time for teaching and establishing, really establishing routines for reflection and retrospection. Because in on the treadmill of doing, we need to step down once in a while, take a breath, assess what we are doing, why we are doing it, what difference does it make. So I think that for solopreneurs, they need to step down the treadmill of creating and consuming, and spend time reflecting and retrospecting on what they've done, how they've done it, what difference has it made to them, to others, right? How can they up their game? What looks like their plan for next 3 months? What are some of the most common sense things that they could do from here, and so on? So I think people have to. Most people don't spend time reflecting and retrospecting, and therefore learning happens, but it is not consolidated because you are never reflecting on it. And establishing routines
Mm.
on your calendar for reflection, I think, is a very powerful technique that has sort of helped me. And then the final thing I want to say is that choose wisely. You cannot be everything to everybody, so you have to choose your customers wisely. You have to choose your pursuits wisely. You have to experiment in short bursts, so that you don't spend too much time doing something which doesn't sell or doesn't make a cut, right? So you want to make sure that you are choosing things wisely. And I think that's the real entrepreneurial work, is not to raise invoice. The real entrepreneurial work is not to find customers. The real entrepreneurial work is to choose what's most effective.
Mm. Wow, fantastic! This is a very short MBA that I have received.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tanmay, on that. See, as you said, one of the statistics that you talked about, only less than 10% of the creators they make a decent living. Now, I'm assuming that is, or rather, let me put it this way: In the US, there are a lot of people who are playing in the creator economy and they are making decent living, maybe
Mhm.
even if it is less. Will that work in India?
So I think when you're playing in creator economy, right, you're essentially playing to a global audience because
Hmm.
creators work on internet and they are sort of more broad based in that sense, which means that I think that anyone can become a creator as long as they are engaging their audience in innovative ways. Right now, it could be the audience could be India, the audience could be US, the audience could be right anywhere in the world. But I think the key is that we have to believe that we can become a creator. That's number one. Because if you
Mm,
don't,
mm,
if I start my creator journey as a side gig, not completely believing whether it will work, then I'm going to put half-hearted effort. Then I'm not going to be committed. I'm not going to be consistent. I'm not going to be practicing my work. I'm not going to do lifelong learning around it because I'm not convinced this will work. Right? We don't spend energy on things we are not sure about. So one thing, the first thing is starts with
yes.
that belief. The second is, I think, is that we have to have fun along the way, which means that we have to ensure that our work helps others but in a fun way, right? Because when you're a creator, you have to define your audience very clearly. My audience, for example, is people who are senior business leaders, aspiring leaders, executive coaches, consultants, and people who are responsible for spreading ideas within the organization, in the society, and so on. Now that's my audience. Everything I do is for in the service of them, right? So I think
Mm,
that create whether we can thrive in creator economy or not, it depends on how we take that journey in our head and start from there. But I personally believe that anybody can be a creator. Now there are challenges along the way. The platforms are still evolving. The business models are not really clear. There is a lot of noise. There's a lot of competition, which means that platforms are actually squeezing the creators' money. And they're charging
mm,
10, 20, 30, up to 30% of what creator earns. Now that's why I think it's important that we build our own platform, our own audience, right? Now not everybody is able to make consistent money. That's a problem. Platforms eating away. So there's a lot of this thing, and it needs a constant mindset of hustling, right? And
mm,
hustling is a great word in entrepreneurial world. People use it very often. However, I believe that hustling is not sustainable if you want to really build a long frame business, right? Therefore, I think that focusing on your journey without focusing too much on the destination, taking one step at a time, seeing what works, right? Interacting with people, getting feedback. I think it's underrated but very important. Okay, and how do we approach them? I think I've answered some of that, but I'll still
yeah,
go ahead
yeah.
and summarize that. We need to build our own audience. We need to have our own platform. That should be the hub of all our work. And then social media platforms could be spokes that bring the traffic to your website. But we have to adopt a hub and spoke model. We have to show. Don't have to sell. Now, this is big for creators because the moment I talk to someone online, the first thing I do is I introduce myself and say, hey, I have this to offer, I have that to offer. And people immediately get disconnected.
Mm,
I think we have to show our work and take every conversation with a mindset that I don't want to squeeze this conversation. I want to add value to the conversation. And then business automatically happens as a byproduct of that conversation, that relationship, that that likeliness that you create out of your work and around yourself. I think that brings a lot of work. I've had customers who've been working with me for more than 5 years now, and so it's even when it was a side gig, I had customers with working with me, and now today they are like full blown customers, right? We have to also understand that we have to build for what makes difference, not build for what makes it viral. There are if you go to
mm,
social platforms, there's so much of content that's aimed at being viral. Now, it can be viral today, but tomorrow it's forgotten. My theory there is that I will focus on creating stuff that has a long shelf life. And the key question I ask myself there is that if my daughter, who is 15 years old now, or if my son, who is 10 years old now, if they consume this content after 10 years, will it still be valuable?
mm,
So I'm looking for longer shelf life, maybe timelessness of the idea before I convert it, because those are the ideas that the world needs more of. We need gentle reminders and nudges about what is right and what's wrong and how to do. So I don't build for virality. I build for delivering value, and then virality happens as a byproduct. And that's exactly what this focusing on the journey means to me. And then I think the final thing I want to say is that we have to support other creators because creator economy is not easy. And instead of looking at everyone as a competition, if we start collaborating with people, exchanging ideas, sharing our knowledge freely, I think what starts to happen is that the ecosystem starts to lift itself, and that's how we grow together. That's how we learn together. Communities are powerful. Whether you like it or not, you are a part of community. Why not choose them more authentically, so that they add value to your pursuit, and your pursuit adds value to that community.
You said about your audience, you are very clear about your
Yeah.
audience, but you also talked about supporting the creator economy, the fellow
Yeah.
creators. In that aspect, are you doing anything? How can people approach to you? When I say approach to you, it is not for free. I mean, it could be that paid service as well. It could be an information product that you are putting it out. It could be a course that you are creating. So what are you doing in that particular field?
So what I'm doing is that I am a part of a very thriving community of leadership practitioners, thought leaders at a global level. I've worked with about six of the top 50 thinkers in the world so far, and the journey continues. So I'm in touch with a community, so I know what the community really needs. I'm also in touch with the community of people who offer services similar to mine, which means that if there's an
Hmm.
opportunity where I need to offer leadership coaching, but at the same time also create the talent strategy, right? I have people who are into talent strategy. If I have to, let's say, do process remodeling for, let's say, software services company, for example, so I have a high level view of how that works. I've done CMMI, I've done ISO in the past. However, I choose not to invest my time into it, right? So I will have a network of
Hmm.
associates that I've created very carefully. So I basically help them. They're all solopreneurs. They're all doing their own thing. However, that's the future of work, that we'll have a project, self-organizing community, people coming together for a cause, then the team gets dispersed, and there's next project where they might call you in for something. And that's how the whole ecosystem will work in the future, right? And even today it's working. So it's not like I'm not trying to be futuristic here. It's the current reality that we most creators are a part of self-organizing networks where people come together, work on something substantial, then they go back to their core. So yeah, that's just a high level view of how I think about it.
I totally agree with you on that, Tanmay. A couple of years back, I wrote a blog post saying the future of jobs or future of career is going to be like the Hollywood model.
Yeah,
It's a network of experts.
absolutely.
Like the most quoted example that I always give is A.R. Rahman and Danny Boyle. They came
Yeah,
together, created a movie, and they reaped the rewards, but they don't work for each other,
absolutely. Ab-
and they don't work for a company as well.
Absolutely.
And subsequently they came back and collaborated on a project, reaped a pie, but again they don't work for each other. And you are quoting a similar metaphor and similar thing in practice that you are doing.
Absolutely.
So wonderful to hear that, Tanmay. uh, you already said you don't plan for future,
Mhm.
but now that 1.5 years you have been in solopreneur, what does future look like for you? What are the plans, at least for the next 3 years or so?
So
What does it look for you?
it's interesting because I have a bouquet of services that I offer to the customers, and over past 1 year, I now have a fair sense of what works, what brings more value to my business, what at the same time brings more value to my customers and as well. And I'm trying to scale up some of those areas that I think have a potential to grow bigger. However, as far as my own work in the artistic domain, or let's say in the ideas domain is concerned, I will continue to do what I'm doing. I'll be as consistent as I used to be in the past. So consistency doesn't change, the purpose doesn't change. I think the methods will evolve from there. But one thing is clear, that I think once you step into this exciting world of solopreneurship, exploring possibilities, talking to so many interesting, wonderful, knowledgeable, insightful people, it's very hard to go back into the into a routine organization where you're given the first day you're given KPIs and a bunch of people to manage and stuff like that. I think organizations will thrive if they're able to inculcate this spirit of exploration, the spirit of leadership, the spirit of creativity, the spirit of adding value without worrying about when or where or how much will my next paycheck be, right? I think what I've seen as a leader of large organization is that most people are The systems that are there to help people do better are the systems that are stifling their creativity. Right?
Mm,
KPI is a
mm.
standard great example. You're given KPIs, and then it limits you into a certain box, and then you just do things in that box. And when you step out into the world, you are just you're just very limited in terms of your mindset, and how you see things and how you experience the world. And I think that's what my pursuit is. I want organizations to build a culture where people thrive, where people are free to experiment, where people are okay to fail, okay, without having to worry about whether that will impact the salary increase or not and stuff like that. And that's my purpose. That's what I stand for, which means I do not have a particular disorientation with the organizational life. I've been there for 23 years, but I think that if, as an independent creator, as an independent contributor, as an independent solo professional consultant coach, this helps me look at organizations more objectively as an outsider and be able to offer solutions that will certainly help them raise their own bar, whether it's their culture, their leadership, their talent, their strategic frameworks and whatnot. So, yeah, I think that's a crux of my. I think my long-term plan is to stick to the business, stick to making the difference, stick to being consistent with what I put out there, and be authentically me and bring out my full expression in form of work, whether it's a service, it's a product, whether it's a conversation like this. My constant challenge will be, how do I bring my most authentic, most truthful expression out there in whatever I do or whatever I say. And so that's in a nutshell my business plan.
So one of the things that did not come from you in this whole conversation is being a role model, but by being authentic, by being generous, that is what you have become. You have inspired a lot of people, not only in the sketchnoting arena, but in almost in all of the creativity aspirations
Mhm.
and pursuit. You have become a role model for that. So thank you very much for that. I'm not saying only from my side. I'm saying it from a lot of people that I have interacted. I'm conveying that particular thanks to
Absolutely. No,
you,
it's very
Tanmay.
humbling to know that people look up to me for what I do. However, I think it doesn't change the fundamentals of what we just discussed. And I think even being role model is a byproduct. It's people's assessment, not my assessment. So, I mean, I wouldn't declare myself as an influencer, thought leader, whatever. I would just say that I'm a practitioner who adopts a mindset of generosity, abundance, and shares the work out there in a hope that it makes difference, that it changes habits, and it changes the culture that our organizations today have.
Lovely, Tanmay. Tanmay, one of the characteristics that you said is generosity, and I have seen it. I have seen it in the last 30 minutes. I have seen it in many of the sketches that you have done, and you have freely shared those things. You
Mhm,
didn't charge for
mhm.
them. So thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you for being generous with the time. Thank you for your generosity in sharing your
Mhm.
ideas and your practice and your experience in the solopreneur journey. I thank you very much for that,
It
Tanmay.
was an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you, Joseph. And it's great to share what little I know about how the world works, especially in the creation side of things and expression side of things. So thank you so much for having me. I really cherish this opportunity to make a small difference out there.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please share what you liked in our conversation on social media and tag us. Have a life of wins.